Hey everyone, welcome back. Let's discuss the best foods for inflammation. There's a three-component model through which I think about inflammatory foods and an anti-inflammatory diet. First, what foods are rich in antioxidants? Secondly, what foods can help to balance the inflammatory potential of your cell membrane, specifically the fatty acid composition? And then third, what I'm most excited to discuss with you is how certain foods will impact your gut and the immune system therein. Because many of you may have tried an anti-inflammatory food and said, boy, I feel bloated, gassy, I had loose bowels. Maybe the next day I had some joint pain or a skin reaction. And this is because not all foods will react in your gut and with your immune system the same way, irrespective of the antioxidant content therein. So let's work through this model. And what this should do is give you a list of foods with the appropriate caveats and nuances for how to personalize those to your system. Because ultimately, it's not about just having a list of healthy foods. It's about knowing how to pair those to the individual. Okay, so the first component of this model is foods that are rich in antioxidants. Some of the chief antioxidants, and this is not an exhaustive list, are glutathione, known as the master antioxidant, vitamin E, selenium, coenzyme Q10, and vitamin C. And one study I wanted to share with you, which I found fascinating, they looked at the effect of dark chocolate on the inflammatory response. Now, high cacao content, low sugar content, chocolate or cacao is actually fairly rich in antioxidant polyphenols. What this study did was take two groups of people. One group was given a polyphenol-free chocolate. The other group was given a polyphenol-containing chocolate. And then they induced stress and inflammation. And you're looking at two lines over time, over 160 minutes. Those who had the non-polyphenol chocolate saw, as you would expect, a spike in inflammation after these researchers induced inflammation in these subjects. However, those who consumed the dark chocolate containing the antioxidants, the polyphenols, they did not have inflammation after the induction. So this tells us that foods can have a powerful effect on buffering the inflammatory response, in this case, the stress-induced inflammatory response, with which many of us are probably contending with. So that sort of sets the stage. Now let's talk about some of the foods that can help to replete your antioxidant stores. Because the world is constantly barraging us with insults that tear down and exhaust our antioxidant supply. So if we can consume foods that are rich in antioxidants, then we'll be replete. As far as glutathione, some of the top food sources are broccoli, asparagus, and avocado. For vitamin E, wheat germ oil and almonds are rich sources. Brazil nuts, eggs, and brown rice are all very rich in selenium. Vitamin C is contained in oranges, strawberries, potatoes, and peppers. And CoQ10 is rich in salmon and in organ meats. Now, that's not an exhaustive list, but it at least gives you some targets to make sure you're incorporating into your diet and across different keystone antioxidants so that you have a rich endogenous supply of antioxidants. And by the way, if this has been helpful, please comment, like, and subscribe. Okay, so the second component complements eating in such a way so as to build up these stores of antioxidants. And this is eating to balance the cell membrane, which dictates how inflammatory your cells are. And this is where we have the entrance of omega-3 fatty acids. The ratio in the cell membrane of omega-3 to omega-6 is very important. You've likely heard of the importance of fish oil and omega-3s. And it's not to say that conversely, omega-6s are bad. However, in many Western societies, we consume too much omega-6, and it throws off this balance that we're trying to achieve in the cell membrane. And like many things in biology, balance is key. There's even a test for this, and I'm not necessarily endorsing this test or recommending you go out and do it, but just to make the point that the omega-3 index can be tested by a test like the Omega Quant. And scores that are more favorable or higher, having a higher ratio of omega-3, have been correlated with better cognition and a lower risk of heart disease. So the foods here to include would be salmon, mackerel, tuna, and sardines, aiming for 2 3 to 4 ounce servings per week of these. And additionally, flaxseed, chia seed, and walnuts are also good sources of omega-3s. Then we come to the third component, and the one that I'm most eager to sort of unpack with you, how a given food or foods impact your gut and the immune system therein. Remembering that the largest density of immune cells in your entire body is in your small intestine. So this is why we see such a connection between someone's gut health and how a food is digested and inflammation. Firstly, fermented foods, which are rich in probiotics, are a great idea to incorporate into your diet, but it's also where some of the dietary nuance comes in. Firstly, let me just cover a data point here from a group of researchers at Stanford published in the prestigious journal Cell, wherein they found a high fermented food diet was actually more anti-inflammatory than a high fiber diet. Now, it's not a contest, but it just makes the point. A 2023 umbrella meta-analysis, so a very comprehensive review of the body of data, found that probiotic supplementation led to reductions in numerous inflammatory cytokines, C-reactive protein, TNF-alpha, and interleukin-6. So there's pretty good data demonstrating that either fermented foods with the probiotics they contain or a probiotic supplement can reduce inflammation. Not surprising given the impact that probiotics have on the gut and the connection between the gut, the immune system, and inflammation. The goal here would be 1 to 6 servings of fermented foods per day. Some common fermented foods: kefir, yogurt, kombucha, sauerkraut, and kimchi. This is not an exhaustive list, and some traditional cultures have more nuanced, less sort of popularly known fermented foods, and these would all generally be fine. The nuance here has to do with someone's histamine tolerance. Now, histamine is a signaling molecule of the immune system. When someone has IBS, irritable bowel, SIBO, or other food reactivity and or gastrointestinal symptoms, they're more likely to have a high baseline level of histamine because of these things going on in the gut. We know that bacterial populations, when they overgrow, themselves, the bacteria produce histamine, but also as the immune system starts reacting and trying to counterbalance this overgrowth, as part of that inflammatory immune response, histamine is also released. So for some people, they may say, boy, I've tried fermented foods and I think I felt worse. Well, you're not alone. This is something that's decently well documented. And because of this, a few specific recommendations. Firstly, this is where a probiotic supplement might be better than foods, at least in the short term, until you heal. We've also compiled this table listing foods from lowest histamine content up through the highest. Kefir is the lowest histamine containing food. Conversely, kimchi is the highest. So in order from lowest to highest, kefir, more histamine in yogurt, more in sauerkraut, and the most in kimchi. Now, maybe not surprisingly, kimchi is also the richest in probiotics. So it's not to say kimchi is good or bad, but if you are someone who perhaps notices that when you consume fermented foods, you have a runny nose, you have flushing, you have heart palpitations, you have loose bowels, you have brain fog, you have insomnia. These are all symptoms demonstrative of histamine intolerance or histamine overload. And again, at least temporarily, reducing dietary histamine content can be helpful. And we do have a full low histamine diet guide for those of you who may want to try this, remembering that if you perform the correct dietary intervention for your gut, your body will let you know within 1 to 2 weeks that it's helpful. You'll start seeing symptoms reduce. And then I would ride that dietary protocol until you plateau, you're stable for 1 or 2 months, and then start reintroducing foods. Because remember also that as your gut heals, your food tolerance should increase. The second food here that requires some nuance is foods that are high in fiber and high in prebiotics. It's not to say that fiber and prebiotics are good or bad, but in those who have sensitive digestion, they can be more prone to flaring symptoms. And this is where something like a low FODMAP diet can be quite helpful. A low FODMAP diet has been shown to be quite beneficial for gastrointestinal symptoms and allows you a food list that is most likely to be tolerated. And so this is where avoiding high prebiotic or high FODMAP foods like broccoli, cauliflower, garlic, and onions, and instead focusing on lower FODMAP, lower prebiotic foods like kale, spinach, carrots, and cucumbers can be beneficial. And a low FODMAP diet guide is not hard to find. We have one easily available, and we'll link to that in the notes. And also the University of Monash has an app where you can punch in specific foods. And here the same concept applies, wherein if it's the right dietary approach for you, you'll notice a benefit within 1 or 2 weeks. And if so, continue on that dietary plan until you peak. Maintain that approach for a month or 2, and then start reintroducing foods. And it has also been demonstrated for FODMAPs that with time, tolerance improves and people can successfully reintroduce these foods. So I just want to keep issuing this reminder that food tolerance should improve over time. And then we come to glutamine-rich foods. And these are foods that can help to repair the lining of the gut. Some of the richest sources of dietary glutamine are beef, chicken, and eggs, although it may be hard from diet alone to obtain sufficient glutamine to really heal the gut. So you may want to consider adding in 5 to 15 grams per day supplementally of glutamine. Okay, so then coming back to our model, we've discussed foods that are rich in antioxidants that can help to replete your endogenous or internal stores. We've discussed the importance of omega-3s, consuming enough so that you have the appropriate balance of omega-3 to omega-6 in the cell membrane, thus dictating cellular inflammatory potential. And we've also discussed a few nuances regarding certain foods and how they impact the gut. This is where the fermented foods, probiotics and histamine come in, the fiber, prebiotics, and FODMAPs come in, and consuming adequate glutamine can also be helpful. And I wanted to close with a quote from Confucius. For those of you who may be looking into an anti-inflammatory diet, you may be struggling with joint pain or fatigue or bloating or brain fog or whatever it is. And I know that can be frustrating. So here is what Confucius had to say on the matter. It does not matter how slowly you go as long as you do not stop. So if you hit a roadblock, if you've been frustrated, keep at it, don't stop. And even if your progress is slow, keep going. Okay, this is Dr. Ruscio. Hope this helps, and I'll talk to you next time.